Good morning, Central Florida and beyond. This is Dr. Ron Lynch, once again, sharing some public health information. And I'm happy to have at my side Camille. And Camille, how are you doing today? How are you feeling?
I'm doing very well. Thank you for having me back.
Sure. Well, today we're going to discuss rural communities and some of the health inequities and disparities that actually exist there. And this was part of the internship experience that I had. And I mentioned in an earlier program that it had to do with cooperative extension, which is the federal government providing funds for universities and colleges to share some of the academic research with the close communities so that academic research actually finds its way to people who live there and work there. In this particular instance, we're talking about people who live in rural communities, and specifically Hamilton, Suwannee, and Taylor counties. And I guess some of these counties are a little south of where we are, but there is a stigma about rural communities, and some of it may certainly be true, and that is that they seem to have worse health outcomes than suburbia or in rural America. What are your thoughts about that? Why would you suspect that they may have inadequate or incomplete health care and health outcomes?
Well, my initial guess would be that perhaps access is difficult for them. Transportation might be difficult. And also just perhaps literacy, maybe not knowing to the full extent what they need to do and how to go about it.
Yeah, I think you're onto something. Well, as it turns out, there's a higher prevalence of chronic disease, poor health behaviors, and as you said, limited access to health care in these rural communities compared to urban areas. And there is also a situation where there is these chronic conditions, and of which one of them is diabetes. And diabetes can have some far-reaching ramifications, which we're going to talk about in just a moment.
I had a quick question about how many people would make up these three counties that you just mentioned.
Good question. It would be roughly about 80,000 people. And once these chronic medical conditions begin to blossom, it can be very difficult to catch up and ever try to maintain or restore the health of these individuals. So some of the worst things that could happen where diabetes would come into full impact is on the vision. So a diabetic could have diabetic retinopathy, and that requires pictures to be taken of the retina, the back of the eye, so that between the ophthalmologist or the endocrinologist, they can decide whether or not some form of laser therapy would be appropriate or not. One of the other complications of diabetes would be the poor circulation, which is rampant with the diabetic condition. And between that and the neuropathy, these both could lead to the need for an amputation, and whether that's a foot or below the knee amputation. So, and you can imagine that could be a very costly endeavor to try to replace a leg or try to replace an eye. The third major medical chronic condition that could come about with diabetes would be nephropathy. And this is where there is actually kidney damage to the extent that they would now have to go on dialysis.
I see.
And dialysis is not fun. It's maybe 3 to 4 times a week, and it would be spending at least 3 to 4 hours per day on each of those sessions.
Is that something that's done in the home, or they have to go and travel?
Good question. It is better done under professional supervision, but under other circumstances, perhaps it could be done in a decided setting. Could
I
be a
see.
church, it could be some other office, but I would say the ideal place to get that done is at a dialysis center,
I
and
see.
sometimes that's in a hospital, sometimes it's in a freestanding setup. Now there are other complications that a diabetic could be having to deal with, but those are the three that I'm going to start to have a discussion on. But I don't want to leave out that one could be more susceptible to cardiovascular issues as well. In other words, having a heart attack, having some chest pain, except that because of a word that I used earlier, neuropathy, a diabetic may not actually feel chest pain.
Wow.
They could misinterpret that discomfort as heartburn,
I see.
which brings up another term, gastroparesis, where there is a delay in the gastric emptying. So they could confuse what could be a very lethal situation because of that. And stroke may also be somewhat of a problem. So as I was trying to consider how some of these problems could be solved, it occurred to me that there's a lot of digital high technology that could be employed. And when I went deeper into the research, I discovered that, in fact, this was actually happening in other places, other isolated places. But why not here in Florida, and why not right now? So what am I talking about? Probably number one would be telemedicine and telehealth, and which has already become a thing ever since COVID came to town. Do you think that there is some wisdom in maybe employing some telehealth or telemedicine in these rural communities? Does that
Yeah,
seem
absolutely.
sensible?
Absolutely. I think whatever it can take to bridge the gap, and especially if we already have the technology available and it's just kind of about implementing it, I think it's more than reasonable to think that we can get it done.
Yeah. So job number one would have to be ensuring that the communities have broadband, fast internet speed. And I'm not really sure how long of a process that would take, but I would imagine a matter of weeks or months if it was a dedicated concern. And also, there are a lot of wearable devices. I was looking at some of the benefits of the Apple Watch, for example,
Yep.
is now capable of picking up on blood sugars, which could be digitally transferred to a primary care office or to a specialty care. And I'm not exactly advocating that these rural individual members all need to get Apple devices,
No, of course not.
but there are probably Androids and other comparative technologies that could aid. So there are wearables. They're known as, and that may involve the distribution of these wearable technologies, and it could also be that they would have to get special instruction.
Yeah.
Even the wisest among us wouldn't mind having some technological advice and maybe some orientation. Are you aware of any other wearable types of technologies that may have some kind of a use for clients or patients?
Yeah, I actually purchased the Whoop, which I was interested in mainly because it tracked something called HRV, heart rate variability, which is, it can kind of give you a better sense of where your nervous system is at. And I was interested in kind of learning more about that.
Yeah. So interesting. This heart rate variability. A lot of people don't know how valuable it might be, but one of the important physiological systems that we have is the nervous system, which is divided into an autonomic nervous system, which sort of means the automatic. But there is two distinctive separations, one being the sympathetic nervous system and the other one being the parasympathetic nervous system. So most of us would be aware of that uh, bulldog or some other ferocious animal chasing us, and that would set off the fight or flight. It would set off freeze, possibly. You know, I live in a neighborhood where we've got bears, big black bears.
Yes, I've seen some photos.
I walked my neighborhood only to look up 30 to 40 feet, and there's the bear. And I could act like I'm not afraid of bears all day long,
Right.
but when you see the bear, particularly when he goes up on two legs, you are now fully aware that you are no match.
Right.
And so, in some instances, the freeze, you're just freezing, and it might sound like a strategy, but when you see one of these guys, you automatically sort of freeze.
Yeah.
But if I lived out the rest of my day experiencing a bear chasing me or a bear threatening me or a lion, it begins to cause some form of accelerated aging, and it's not a good thing. And yet, all of us work under deadlines. We work under work employee kinds of stress. There may be family distress. There may be love relationships, which in effect keep us hyper excited.
Right. A lot of the issues that we face today don't get resolved in the moment. The bear leaves and we can walk away and kind of settle from that. But a lot of these problems kind of just consume us.
Yeah. And so we've lost the capacity to sort of rest and to exploit the benefits of say meditation and breathing. And so we bring this up because the heart rate variability may identify those individuals that might benefit from legitimate meditation and just learning how to slow down, learning how to ground yourself. And where better than the rural community might you get an opportunity to interact with nature, to walk, this may sound strange, but barefoot. But with diabetics, of course, that could present some threats. So we don't want them to step on any glass or rocks or so. But even standing in a place that you know is safe could be a way to ground your body and to help. By the way, I think meditation in the next 5 years is going to be offered at many of the elementary, middle, and high schools.
That would be so encouraging. I often wish I had started sooner.
Do you meditate?
Yes, I do. I do meditate. I meditate in the mornings and sometimes in the evenings. I find that it kind of sets the tone for the rest of the day. I'm more present and I feel more within myself. And I've found it to be very successful. And I've only been doing it more seriously for around 8 or 9 months now.
Well, and you seem to be very level and balanced, and
it's all a facade.
Never seen you angry. That's a good thing. So just recapping what we've said so far is that rural communities, they suffer a greater prevalence of chronic disease and associated complications, and this is according to the CDC. And that would result in greater, we would say, morbidity and mortality. But basically, that simply means that they're sicker and they may die more often and more frequently. So there appears to be a suboptimal social and environmental circumstance. We call those determinants of health. And so there would be an emphasis in what we're talking about with the telemedicine and these wearable devices to empower these community members, and we would also add to that various needs assessment tools. So what are needs assessment tools? Glad you asked. Needs assessment tools may involve surveys, they're questionnaires, they could be focus groups, they could be interviews, but we would want to get the input from these rural communities and to give them the sense that they're invested. Mm-hmm. It would be very doubtful that they would reject the notion of technologies that would not necessarily demand that they find their way 3 hours away to the nearest hospital, right, 2 hours away from the nearest urgent care center, and maybe an hour away from the nearest 7-Eleven. So by empowering them to take greater responsibility, we would already have accomplished some great gain, and we could get them to buy into that. And once they buy into it, there's a greater chance that they will comply and want to go further. So when we get into things like, I call it lifestyle medicine. Lifestyle medicine is where we would essentially show them behaviors that would be more health promoting. And I actually have a little acronym called New Start, where we got to deal with nutrition, with exercise, with water, with perhaps appropriate sunlight. We don't want any skin cancers, but we still need the vitamin D machine that comes from being out in the sun. The plants certainly love photosynthesis, and so we know that there's something special about the sun. Breathing, we talked about breathing for a second. Rest, and the rest is not just physical rest, it's also emotional, spiritual rest. And then there's a word called temperance, which simply means that we got to have some kind of self-discipline and self-control. You can't eat that fourth piece of cake. You can't have that third bowl of ice cream. You can't smoke a pack a day and think that you're on a good path. You can't drink that bottle of wine or liquor and think that over a period of time is gonna do you good.
Right. It's about balance of all of
Right,
things.
right. So we've got the telehealth. We've got these wearable devices that could pick up on blood sugar, maybe blood pressure, maybe devices that could help us do urine analysis that would be useful. But in addition to that, I think that if we had mobile vehicles, a mobile van that was dedicated for health purposes, it was equipped with some basic things that a nurse practitioner, a lab tech, or a radiographic technician could use. I think that would be wonderful. So each of these three communities, Taylor, Hamilton, and Swanee, would have two mobile vehicles perhaps. In addition to that, what do you think about an RV? You think an RV could serve a purpose?
Yeah, absolutely. I think those things are a great idea to kind of get more visibility, and so just people in the community being aware of what's even available, because I think a large part of it is not having the full information. So just in terms of visibility, it would be huge.
Yeah, so can you imagine an RV that pulls up to a Walmart where a lot of people populate, and they not only do some of their food shopping, but the other things. But I think that if there was a mini hospital set up at a place like that it would garner some attention, particularly for those who have been identified to have known chronic diseases. And then once again it would mitigate and negate the need to travel so far,
which is probably what's discouraging them already.
Absolutely. So by using schools, churches, civic centers, gymnasiums, these could be locations within their communities that would allow health to take place. It just has to be done strategically and intelligently. It certainly would involve training, but I mentioned once again nurse practitioners, maybe LPNs, maybe lab, X-ray personnel, IT. We're always going to need. I visited the Winter Park Library recently. They've got a great IT staff down there, and that can make so much sense to have them employed within this technological world that we live in right now. So here's another description that I like. By taking on a project like this, using these new technologies and what's available, we can reduce the high cost of complications of diabetes. We can motivate specific populations for improved primary specialty care. We can train staff, family, patients on the use of these technologies. By so doing, we can improve self-efficacy, confidence, and health literacy. And these are some very highly prized benefits. So I'd like to also say that some work has been done in New Mexico It was the Zuli telenephropathy clinic, where they were able to bring a kidney specialist to a rural community, and I guess this was done periodically, but they demonstrated that they were able to facilitate and improve kidney function rather successfully and smoothly. Do you have any idea of what one person who's using dialysis, how much that may charge the system?
On a yearly basis?
Yes, on an annual basis.
I would guess somewhere between 30 and 40,000.
Well, you're not far off, but the numbers can range from 30 to 70,000, depending upon what region of the country that you're in. So to preserve one's kidney is critically important. And from working as a physician for 25 plus years, I've noticed that the medical system is not as willing to want to pay for preventive counseling and to be proactive, but they'll gladly pay for dialysis.
Yeah.
The same may go for other things. So in Australia, they were able to use some of these same techniques that we're talking about to facilitate the care of to avoid foot and leg amputations. And that can also be a very expensive proposition, if you can imagine that a good prosthetic, and some of these prosthetics that we're talking about have really come a long way. I can recall a guy, we've probably all seen him when we were little kids. His name was Clark Kent. And so Superman, as you know, in real life, did in fact have a spinal injury, had to undergo a lot of care because he was paralyzed. But between that research and the research that's done for military personnel, prosthetics can almost take someone that could not even stand up and have them as a bionic kind of a personality now, able to move and to do some things, including entering Olympic events.
Right.
Now, this is not necessarily what our projections are for diabetics with complications, but it's just a reminder that prosthetics can be expensive. And so how much more sensible would it be if we can avoid just one limb amputation? Mm-hmm. And so that was the success story of the clinic that was in Australia. And so finally, there are places right here in our country of America, this great USA, where there are devices, they're known as non-mydriatic cameras that can be used at some of those selected locations or by the proper personnel that could take pictures of an eye, mm-hmm. send that back to the ophthalmologist, send that back to the endocrinologist, and decisions could be made about maybe laser therapy.
Yeah, I think that's an excellent point to make a note on, how their information is being seen by specialists and not just being seen by a general practitioner or a family doctor. It's being evaluated by people that would be evaluating it if they lived maybe in the cities or in the suburbs. So they're still getting the same quality of care. Yeah.
And so my the vision that is clear there with what we're talking about is a greater degree of networking and collaboration with the health department, with the hospitals, with doctors' offices, right. and other community stakeholders. All of those things, in addition to the patients being involved, would make this a potential successful mm-hmm. program. And I'm actually in the process of writing up a $10 million grant that I think would make a lot of sense, because it would give a wonderful return on investment in a short period of time.
Yeah.
So I'm going to make a final close on this so that we can move on to some other areas. But you have any further thoughts or questions as we round things out?
No, not currently, but I'm enjoying the conversation.
Okay. Well, we, we tried to highlight that the rural communities have health inequities, and we're just wanting to bring that to parity. We want them to improve their health, but they have to take responsibility. And as a medical community, we have to try to go to them. If they can't come to us, we can find ways of making this thing happen. And if we do that appropriately, intelligently, with some thought, and with the notion of cooperative extension and program planning and evaluation, I think that we can make a difference if we utilize the God-given skills and abilities that we have. And so with that, I'm going to close and thank you, Central Florida and beyond, for listening to this public health discussion, and hopefully it will be of some value to you, your family, other communities, and you will reflect back on where you heard some of this information first. And so may the rest of the day be good for you, Camille.
Thank you.
And may the good force be with you, my audience. Thank you, and have a wonderful day.